Touch the king's wolf, Omega, and let the court see whether ancient curses still recognize disposable girls." The words rolled across the throne hall like winter thunder, and every noble in Blackwood Crown turned to watch Evelyn Harper die, without anyone needing to say the word. She stood at the center of the marble floor in a plain gray dress, her pale hands folded so tightly her knuckles looked carved from ice, while the women chosen for the Luna selection glittered around her in silk, pearls, and cruel smiles. Evelyn was not supposed to be there as a candidate. She had been summoned to scrub the silver dust from the floor after the ceremony, to keep her eyes lowered, to remember that a forgotten Omega did not breathe too loudly beneath a king's roof. Above her, on the obsidian throne, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood watched in perfect silence. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, cold, flawless, and made for distance. His white skin carried the stillness of frost, his dark hair framed a face no one dared read, and his gray eyes held no warmth at all, not even anger. That frightened Evelyn more than rage would have. Rage meant there was something alive beneath the crown. The king looked as if life had frozen inside him years ago, and no one had been brave enough to ask what had died there. Then the iron doors opened. The sound was low and final, like a vault being unsealed. For royal guards stepped in, not dragging a prisoner, but guiding a massive black wolf bound in pale silver chains that shimmered with old runes. The court fell silent, so quickly Evelyn heard her own breath shake. The wolf was enormous, its dark fur dulled by frost, its golden eyes bright with pain and warning. It did not lunge. It did not need to. Every creature in that hall knew what it was. The king's cursed wolf, the living shadow of the Blackwood line, the beast no healer could calm, no noble could command, and no servant was ever allowed to approach. Cassandra Vale, the favored Luna candidate, smiled as if she had just been handed a crown. "The Omega has such gentle hands," she said sweetly. "Let her clean him. If the curse takes offense, at least we lose nothing valuable." A soft ripple of laughter passed through the court. Evelyn felt it hit her harder than the cold. Nothing valuable. That was what they had called her in Silverpine. That was what they had written beside her name in the pack registry before the ink faded and the page vanished. Forgotten. Unclaimed. Unwanted. She looked toward the throne, though she knew better. For one impossible second, she waited for King Adrian to stop this. He did not move. His expression did not change. But the wolf's eyes shifted to her, and in them Evelyn saw something no one else seemed to notice. Not fury, not hunger, pain. A deep, ancient, soundless pain that pressed against her ribs as if it had been waiting for someone to understand it. Her fear did not leave. It simply became smaller than her pity. Step by step, she crossed the marble. The silver chains hummed. Nobles drew back. Cassandra held her breath, hungry for the scream that never came. Evelyn knelt before the cursed wolf, close enough to feel the cold rolling off its body, close enough that one movement could end the cruel little story everyone had written for her. The wolf lowered its head until its breath brushed her cheek. Evelyn lifted one trembling hand, palm open, pulse exposed, and whispered, "You're not angry. You're hurting." The hall forgot how to breathe. The wolf's golden eyes widened. The chains gave a faint, brittle sound. And on the throne, for the first time in 7 years, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood felt his frozen heart beat once. Evelyn did not know what made her reach closer. A wiser girl would have stepped back, bowed her head, and let the court have its cruel lesson. A stronger girl might have demanded mercy. Evelyn was neither of those things. She was only an Omega with cold fingers, a shaking breath, and a heart that had never learned how to ignore suffering just because it wore teeth and shadows. The cursed wolf watched her hand as if it were a flame offered in the middle of a blizzard. Its chains gave another faint sound, not loud enough to be a threat, only tired enough to be a plea. Up close, Evelyn could see what the nobles had missed from their safe distance. The silver was not simply wrapped around the wolf. Thin rune-marked pieces had fused into the dark fur like frozen thorns, each one pulsing with a dim blue light that made the air smell like winter stone and old storms. The wolf was not dangerous because it wanted to be. It was trapped inside pain, so ancient the court had mistaken it for rage. "Do not get comfortable, Omega," Cassandra said from behind her, her voice smooth as polished glass. "The beast has let healers closer than this before. None of them lasted. Evelyn heard the warning, heard the hope hidden inside it, but she did not look back. The wolf's golden eyes were fixed on hers, and something in them trembled. Not weakness. Recognition. "I need to touch the chain," Evelyn whispered. The royal guards shifted uneasily. Somewhere above, King Adrian's voice cut through the hall, quiet and absolute. "Let her." The words struck the marble like a command carved in stone. Evelyn's pulse jumped. The king had spoken for her, but not kindly. Not yet. He sounded like a man watching a locked door open and not knowing whether to fear what waited behind it. She lowered her hand to the first silver rune. The moment her fingers closed around it, cold shot through her arm so sharply that her breath vanished. The court blurred. She tasted metal on her tongue and smelled pine buried under ice. Her knees nearly gave out, but she did not pull away. The wolf made a low, broken sound and pressed its massive head closer, as if trying to tell her to stop. That, more than the cold, nearly undid her. A creature everyone feared was worried for her. Evelyn swallowed the ache in her throat. "I know," she murmured, "but someone should have helped you before now." The first rune dimmed beneath her palm. A drop of blood rose from the thin line across her finger where the silver had burned her skin, bright against her pale hand. It fell onto the wolf's dark fur. The hall changed. Not loudly, not with thunder, with silence. The black frost crawling over the wolf's shoulder retreated in delicate veins, shrinking away from the place her blood had touched. A faint white-gold glow spread from Evelyn's hand, soft as dawn through snow. The wolf's eyes half closed. For the first time since it had entered the hall, its breathing steadied. Evelyn moved to the next rune, then the next, each touch stealing warmth from her body, each spark of light returning something to the creature beneath her hands. The nobles stopped smiling. Cassandra's face went still. The royal healers stared as if the laws of their world had just been rewritten by a girl they had considered beneath notice. On the throne, Adrian Blackwood slowly stood. He felt it then, not as a king, not as a cursed man, but as something buried inside him waking from a long, frozen sleep. Warmth spread through his chest in a single painful wave. Color sharpened at the edges of the hall. The gold in the wolf's eyes became the gold of candlelight. The gray of Evelyn's dress became soft and human instead of dull and distant, and the scent of her reached him through 7 years of nothingness. Lavender, cold air, and a sweetness like rain on open earth. Evelyn did not see the king move. She was too focused on the last chain, the darkest one, the one resting over the wolf's heart. Her hand trembled as she touched it. The rune flared once, then faded beneath her blood. The final chain slipped loose and fell harmlessly to the marble. The cursed wolf lowered its great head into Evelyn's lap. A gasp passed through the court. Evelyn sat frozen, her burned fingers hovering over the dark fur, afraid to believe what had happened. Then the wolf leaned into her palm like a weary animal finally allowed to rest. Above them, Adrian gripped the arm of his throne as if the world had tilted beneath him. For years, no healer had reached his wolf. No spell had soothed it. No command had calmed it. Yet this forgotten Omega, mocked in a plain gray dress before his entire court, had done it with shaking hands and a kindness no one had ordered her to give. And for the first time in his reign, the king felt something sharper than the curse. Shame. The command came so softly that half the court seemed to doubt they had heard it. Take her to the lower royal wing. Evelyn's head lifted. The cursed wolf stiffened beneath her hand, a low warning rolling through its chest, but King Adrian Blackwood did not look at the beast. He looked only at her, and that was somehow worse. In his gray eyes, Evelyn saw no gratitude, no mercy, no answer to the strange light that had just faded from her blood. She saw calculation, fear carefully dressed as authority. Around the hall, the nobles began breathing again, as if the king's order had returned the world to its proper shape. Cassandra Vale was the first to recover fully. She stepped forward, one white-gloved hand pressed to her heart, her voice trembling with performance. "Your Majesty, you saw what she did. That was not healing. That was witch blood. No Omega should be able to touch the royal curse and survive its attention." The word which moved through the room like smoke under a door. Evelyn felt it settle on her shoulders. She had heard names before. Weak, forgotten, useless. But this one carried a different kind of danger, a polished danger, the kind noble people could use while pretending their hands were clean. She tried to stand, but the wolf's great head remained in her lap, heavy and trusting, as if it had decided the marble floor, the throne, the crown, and the entire royal court mattered less than the thin shelter of her shaking hand. "I did not cast anything," Evelyn said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not break. "He was in pain." Cassandra's eyes sharpened. "Listen to her. She speaks of the king's wolf as if she knows it." Evelyn looked down at the creature. Its golden eyes were open, clearer now, fixed on her with an emotion she could not name. "Maybe someone should have tried knowing him before chaining him in front of a crowd," she whispered. The silence that followed was colder than the stone beneath her knees. A few nobles recoiled, as if an Omega's honesty were more shocking than any curse. Adrian descended the throne steps one at a time. Each step echoed. He stopped several feet from Evelyn, close enough that the wolf's gaze shifted to him, not hostile, not submissive, simply watchful. For the first time, the king and his wolf looked like two halves of the same wound. "Evelyn Harper," Adrian said, and her name in his mouth sounded strangely unfamiliar, as if the castle itself had nearly forgotten how to. "Hold it. Until the nature of your blood is determined, you will remain under royal custody." Royal custody. The words were silk wrapped around iron. Evelyn forced herself to rise. Her legs felt unsteady, but she did not reach for anyone. Two guards approached with careful steps, far more afraid of the wolf than of her. The moment one extended a hand toward Evelyn's arm, the wolf rose. No leap, no snap, only a sudden towering stillness that made every candle in the hall seem smaller. The guards froze. Evelyn felt the court's panic gather like storm pressure. She turned back to the wolf before anyone could shout. "It is all right," she said softly. "I will be all right." The creature's ears lowered, and the sound it made was so quiet it might have been a breath. Evelyn lifted her hand, letting her fingertips rest once against its brow. "You already did the hard part," she whispered. "You let someone help you." On the throne steps, Adrian felt those words pass through him like a key turning in a lock he did not remember building. The wolf obeyed her. Not because it had been broken, not because it had been commanded, because it trusted her. The realization struck deeper than any accusation Cassandra could have made. His wolf, the part of him no healer had soothed, no counsel had understood, no crown had controlled, had chosen a forgotten Omega in front of the entire kingdom. As the guards led Evelyn away, the court watched her plain gray dress disappear between pillars of black stone. Cassandra smiled, believing the girl had been removed from the board. But Adrian remained where he stood, unable to look away from the doorway. A faint trace of lavender lingered in the air. The wolf sat at the foot of the throne and refused to return to its chains. And somewhere inside the king's frozen chest, shame changed shape into something far more dangerous. Need. Evelyn expected the lower royal wing to smell like a prison. Damp stone, old iron, fear soaked into corners no one cleaned. Instead, it smelled of dust, sealed books, and extinguished candles, as if the castle had chosen to bury its secrets beneath silence rather than stone. The guards left her in a narrow chamber, with one high window and a locked oak door, but no chains. That almost frightened her more. Chains told a person exactly what kind of danger they were in. Courtesy made danger harder to name. She sat on the edge of a narrow bed, her burned fingers wrapped in clean linen by a servant who would not meet her eyes, and listened to the distant sound of wind moving around the towers of Blackwood Crown. Somewhere above, the royal court was probably deciding what she was. Witch. Threat. Mistake. Evelyn looked down at her hands. They did not look powerful. They looked small, pale, and tired. The hands of a girl who had scrubbed floors, mended torn uniforms, carried laundry through icy courtyards, and learned to make herself invisible because invisible girls survived longer. Yet the king's wolf had lowered its head into those hands as if they had been remembered by something older than the throne. The thought made her chest ache. Remembered. The word followed her into the quiet like a ghost. Hours later, a key turned in the lock. Evelyn stood quickly, expecting guards, healers, perhaps Cassandra with another velvet-covered accusation. Instead, Beta Marcus Hale stepped inside carrying a leather folder thick with papers and a small lantern that threw warm light across his serious face. He was broad-shouldered, blond, and careful in the way soldiers became when they had seen too many rooms turn dangerous without warning. "I am not here to harm you," Marcus said. Evelyn gave him a faint, humorless look. That is what people usually say when they have the authority to do it. Something almost like respect crossed his expression. "Fair enough." He placed the folder on the table between them. "The king ordered me to verify your pack records." Silverpine sent 3 pages. All recent. All incomplete. Evelyn's throat tightened. "Incomplete how?" Marcus opened the folder. No birth certificate. No parental registry. No baptism under the moon rites. No transfer record. No childhood physician notes. No school enrollment before age 8. According to official pack history, Evelyn Harper began existing 9 years ago as an unwanted ward in Silverpine custody. The room seemed to tilt. Slightly. Evelyn gripped the back of the chair. "That is impossible." "It should be." Marcus slid another page forward. "It is not only your record. Every mention of the Harper bloodline has been scraped from royal archives. Not burned. Not lost. Removed so cleanly the gaps look intentional." Evelyn stared at the blank spaces where names should have been. Her own life had always felt thin in certain places, like fabric worn down by too many winters. She had no baby stories. No family portraits. No one who remembered her mother's laugh or her father's voice. When she asked questions, Silverpine elders looked away and told her Omegas should not dig through old dirt. Marcus lowered his voice. "There is an old curse in Blackwood history. Most scholars treat it as superstition. The forgotten curse. It does not erase a person's body. It erases the world's willingness to remember them." A coldness deeper than the window's draft crawled along Evelyn's arms. "Why would anyone do that to my family?" Marcus did not answer at first. That silence was an answer. He reached into the folder and pulled out a faded photograph mounted on cracked cardstock. Evelyn did not want to look. Some part of her already knew. But her eyes dropped anyway. The photograph showed a formal portrait taken in the old royal garden, 20 years earlier. At the center stood a young Blackwood prince with solemn gray eyes and a crown too heavy for his age. Beside him was a little girl with white skin, soft brown hair, and blue-gray eyes, clutching a moonflower in both hands as if someone had told her not to let go. Evelyn stopped breathing. The child wore a silver bracelet marked with the same faint pattern that now shimmered under the bandage on Evelyn's wrist. Beneath the photograph, written in careful black ink, were the words, "Evelyn Harper, promised protector of the Blackwood King." Far above them, in the private war room, Adrian Blackwood stood over an identical photograph with both hands braced on the table. For 7 years, his heart had been ice. Now it beat with pain. Not because he remembered everything. Because he was beginning to understand that he had forgotten someone he never should have. Lost. The lantern Marcus left behind burned low by the time Adrian came to the lower royal wing. Evelyn heard his footsteps before the key turned, measured and heavy, each one carrying the weight of a man used to being obeyed even by silence. She stood beside the table with the old photograph still open beneath her fingers. The little girl in the garden stared up from the faded paper with eyes too much like her own, beside a young prince who looked as if he had already been taught that crowns were colder than winter. When the door opened, King Adrian Blackwood filled the threshold in a long black coat, his face pale beneath the lantern glow, his gray eyes fixed not on the room, not on the guarded window, but on the photograph between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air felt too fragile for sound. Then Evelyn asked, "Is it true?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "I do not know all of it." It was the first honest thing he had said to her, and somehow it hurt more than a lie. Evelyn looked down at the child in the picture. "That is me." Adrian stepped closer, but stopped before he reached the table, as if distance had suddenly become the only respectful thing he still possessed. "Yes." The word scraped out of him. "And that boy is you." "Yes." Evelyn waited for an explanation, an apology, a command, anything that would turn the impossible into something solid. Adrian gave her none of those. Instead, he reached toward the iron bar set across the narrow window, the one rimmed with frost though the chamber was not cold enough to freeze. The moment his hand closed around it, the frost melted beneath his palm. Water slid down the dark metal in thin, shining lines. Adrian stared at it, as if the castle itself had betrayed him. Evelyn felt the faint mark beneath her bandage warm in answer. "That happens when you are near me," he said quietly. "The curse loosens. Then maybe you should be afraid of me." I am. She expected the admission to satisfy her. It did not. His fear was not of her power. It was of what her presence was forcing him to remember. Adrian closed his eyes, and the room seemed to draw inward around him. His hand remained on the bar. More frost melted. His breath changed. Not much. Just enough for Evelyn to hear the break in it. There was snow, he said. In the garden. You were crying because someone took your moonflower bracelet. I gave it back to you and told you royal guards protected people who belonged to the crown. Evelyn's fingers curled around the edge of the table. No one had ever told her that memory. No one had ever told her she had belonged anywhere. Adrian opened his eyes, and something raw moved behind the gray. Then another memory. A corridor. Council voices. They said your bloodline carried danger. They said the kingdom would fall if I interfered. I was young enough to believe adults knew the shape of truth, and proud enough to think obedience was wisdom. Evelyn's throat tightened. What happened to me? Adrian looked away, and that small motion answered before he did. You were taken from the palace. Hidden in silver pine. Removed from every record. The curse made us forget the girl, then made us call the empty place peace. The lantern flame flickered. Evelyn wanted to be angry in a clean way, sharp and simple, but her heart would not obey. It felt bruised by a sadness too old for her own body. You forgot me, she said. Adrian bowed his head, not like a king granting mercy, but like a man standing before the one person who could name his shame. Yes. The word fell between them and did not break. It stayed. Evelyn turned from him because his regret was too heavy to look at for long. Your wolf remembered. Adrian's gaze lifted. What? A low warmth brushed the edge of Evelyn's mind, familiar now, deep as pine roots under snow. The royal wolf was not in the chamber, yet she felt him as clearly as a hand resting over her heart. His voice came without sound, ancient, tired, and unbearably gentle. He forgot you. I never did. Evelyn's breath caught. Across from her, Adrian went utterly still, as if he had heard the echo through her expression alone. For the first time, the king looked less like a ruler carved from frost, and more like a man realizing the most loyal part of his soul had been waiting years for the girl he failed to protect. By dawn, the castle had learned to whisper Evelyn's name. Not kindly, not openly. It moved through the servant corridors, the council chambers, the kitchens, and the grand staircases like a draft slipping under closed doors. The forgotten Omega, the girl with the impossible blood, the one the king visited below the royal wing. Evelyn felt those whispers before she heard them, pressed into every lowered gaze as Marcus escorted her back toward the upper court under Adrian's order. The king had not spoken since leaving her chamber, but his silence was no longer empty. It followed her like a storm held behind glass. At the end of the corridor, the doors to the throne hall stood open, and the sound waiting beyond them made Evelyn stop. Not voices, not music. A low, strained whine that passed through her bones and settled behind her ribs. The royal wolf. She pushed past Marcus before he could warn her. The hall was already full. Nobles lined the marble floor in anxious clusters. Royal healers knelt near the throne steps, their silver instruments untouched, their faces pale with helpless dread. At the center of the hall lay the black wolf, no longer calm, no longer resting, but curled tightly around himself as shadowy frost crawled beneath his fur in delicate, spreading patterns. Around his neck gleamed a new collar of dark metal Evelyn had never seen before. Black silver. The smell of it burned the air with winter and ash. Cassandra Vale stood beside him in a gown the color of moonlit ice, one hand pressed delicately to her mouth. She did this, Cassandra said before Evelyn could take another step. The court turned as one. Evelyn felt the accusation strike like cold water. I was locked below. Cassandra's eyes glistened, perfect and false. And yet the beast worsened only after she touched him. Her blood did not heal the curse. It awakened it. A murmur rose. Evelyn searched for Adrian. He stood near the throne, rigid and distant, his gray eyes darker than before. The curse had tightened around him again. She could see it in the unnatural stillness of his face, in the frost silvering the edges of his black coat, in the way his gaze passed over her, as if memory itself had become fog. Adrian, Evelyn said softly. Several nobles gasped at the use of his name. He flinched as if the sound reached him through deep water. Cassandra moved closer to him, careful, graceful, a hand hovering near his arm without touching. Your Majesty, you must protect the crown. Whatever sympathy this girl has stirred in you is part of the spell. The moonstone will prove it. Let her place her hand upon it. If her blood is pure, the stone will remain whole. If she carries the forbidden curse, it will darken, and we will all know the truth. Evelyn looked at the pedestal before the throne. On it rested the moonstone, a pale oval crystal older than Blackwood Crown itself, used to judge blood oaths, treaties, and royal claims. She had scrubbed around its pedestal once as a servant and had been told not to let even her shadow touch it. Now the entire kingdom wanted her hand upon it. Marcus stepped toward Adrian. Your Majesty, this is moving too quickly. Cassandra's smile thinned. Truth does not fear speed. The wolf made another low sound. Evelyn's fear broke open into something steadier. She crossed the hall, ignoring the nobles who drew back from her plain dress and bandaged hand. She wanted to run to the wolf, to pull that black collar free, but two guards blocked her path with uncertain faces. Evelyn looked past them to Adrian. For 1 second, his eyes cleared. Pain moved through them. Recognition. Then the frost returned. Proceed, he said, and the word carried no warmth at all. Evelyn turned to the moonstone. Her hand trembled as she lifted it. She thought of the child in the photograph, the erased records, the wolf who had remembered what the king could not, and the cold court waiting to decide whether she deserved to exist. Her fingers hovered an inch above the stone. Before her skin could touch it, a sharp crack split the silence. The moonstone fractured down the center, light bursting from within like dawn trapped under ice. Cassandra's perfect face went white. The royal wolf lifted his head, and every wolf outside Blackwood Crown began to howl. The howl rolled through Blackwood Crown like a memory too powerful to stay buried. It rose from the outer courtyards, from the pine woods beyond the walls, from the distant watchtowers where royal wolves had been silent for years, and every voice joined the next until the marble beneath Evelyn's feet seemed to tremble with recognition. She stood before the fractured moonstone, her hand still suspended above it, her breath caught somewhere between fear and wonder. Light poured through the crack in the ancient crystal, not harsh, not blinding, but warm and white gold, the color of sunrise touching fresh snow. It reached for her like something alive. The bandage around her wrist loosened on its own, slipping just enough to reveal the faint mark beneath her skin. The same pattern from the bracelet in the photograph. The same pattern hidden in the royal archives. The same pattern the world had been taught to forget. Cassandra stepped back so quickly her silk skirt whispered across the floor. For the first time since Evelyn had seen her, the perfect Luna candidate looked truly afraid. No, Cassandra breathed. The word was small, almost swallowed by the wolves outside. No, that line ended. Evelyn turned toward her. What line? Cassandra's eyes flashed, and in that single unguarded moment, her beauty sharpened into panic. The last of them, she said, too softly, but the court heard. You are the last of them. A murmur broke through the hall. Not laughter this time. Not cruelty. Fear, confusion, and something older than either. The royal healers lowered their heads over trembling hands. Marcus Hale stared at Evelyn as if every missing record, every blank page, every impossible silence had finally found its shape in the girl standing before them. The black-silver collar around the royal wolf sparked with dark frost. Evelyn felt his pain pull at her, but beneath it came another feeling, deeper and steadier, like a drumbeat under frozen ground. Her own heartbeat answered. The moonstone's light gathered at her feet and spread outward in delicate veins across the marble. Wherever it touched, the black frost faded. The royal wolf lifted his head, his golden eyes fixed on Evelyn, and this time she did not only hear him in her mind. She felt him in her blood. Remember, the word opened something. Inside her, not a vision as much as a door. A garden under falling snow. A moonflower bracelet clasped around her small wrist. A boy with gray eyes promising protection in a voice too solemn for a child. A woman with Evelyn's eyes kneeling before the old throne, swearing that the Harper bloodline would shield Blackwood kings from the curse as long as one child remained. Then cold hands taking the bracelet away. Voices saying the kingdom would be easier to rule if the protector was forgotten. Evelyn gasped, one hand pressing over her chest. The memories were not complete, but they were enough. She had not been forgotten because she was weak. She had been erased because she mattered. The truth settled through her slowly, painfully, and with it came a quiet strength that did not need to shout. She looked at Cassandra, then at the council members who could no longer meet her eyes. "You did not hide me because my blood was cursed," Evelyn said. Her voice was still gentle, but it carried to every corner of the hall. "You hid me because it could break yours." Cassandra's mask cracked. "Silence her." No one moved. Outside, the wolves howled louder. Inside, the royal wolf rose to his feet, and the last pieces of black silver slid from his collar like ash-colored ice losing its grip. He crossed the marble slowly, past guards, healers, nobles, and the throne itself, until he reached Evelyn. Then the feared beast of Blackwood Crown lowered himself at her feet. One by one, the wolves beyond the open doors did the same. In the stunned silence, Adrian Blackwood staggered as if a locked chamber inside his mind had burst open. He saw the garden. He saw the little girl. He saw himself turning away while council shadows closed around her. His face went pale with recognition. Evelyn looked up just as the king remembered everything. The moment Adrian remembered, the curse stopped pretending to be frost. It rose from him in long ribbons of black ice, unwinding from beneath his collar, his wrists, his chest, and the shadow beneath the throne, as if something buried there had finally been named. The court recoiled, but the curse did not reach for them. It reached for the king. It wrapped around Adrian with a terrible tenderness, the way a lie clings to the mouth that has spoken it too long. Across the marble, the royal wolf gave a low, aching sound as matching bands of dark frost appeared around his neck and heart. Evelyn felt the pull of both wounds at once. King and wolf, man and soul, bound together by the same forgotten failure. Cassandra's fear twisted into desperation. Her polished voice broke as she stepped backward from the spreading light. "You cannot break it," she said. Her blood was never meant to save him after what he allowed. Regret feeds the curse. It has fed on him for years. Adrian sank to one knee, one hand pressed against his chest, his face stripped of all royal distance. The gray of his eyes was no longer empty. It was full, too full. Memory moved through him like winter water breaking through a dam. A little girl reaching for him in the palace corridor. His own young hand lowering instead of reaching back. Council voices telling him that obedience protected kingdoms. The terrible silence that followed after she was taken away. Evelyn saw it all pass across his face, and the anger she had been holding became tangled with grief. He had failed her. Yes, but the curse had not only stolen her from the world. It had made his remorse into a prison and called the prison duty. "Evelyn," Adrian said, and this time her name sounded like a confession. "Do not do this for me." The royal wolf lifted his head, trembling under the dark frost. His golden eyes were fixed on her, not commanding, not begging, only trusting. Evelyn stepped toward him. Marcus started to move, then stopped, as if he understood this choice belonged to no soldier, no council, no king. Cassandra whispered words in an old language, trying to tighten the curse, but the moonstone light flared brighter around Evelyn's feet. Evelyn knelt before the wolf and placed one hand gently against his brow. The mark on her wrist burned white gold through the linen. She felt the ancient Harper blood wake inside her, not as power for conquest, but as warmth meant to shelter what the world had left in the cold. Adrian reached toward her, his voice rough with panic. "It could take your wolf spirit." Evelyn looked back at him. For the first time, she saw the king not as a frozen judge above her, but as a man crushed beneath the memory of being too late. "I am not saving the king," she said softly. "I am saving the wolf who remembered me." Then she pressed her marked wrist to the dark band over the royal wolf's heart. The hall filled with light. Not fire, not thunder. Dawn. It poured from Evelyn in waves, washing across the marble, climbing the throne, spilling over the watching nobles until every hidden face stood exposed in its glow. The black ice around the wolf cracked without sound, breaking into harmless flakes that vanished before touching the floor. The wolf surged forward, not to attack, not to flee, but to press his forehead into Evelyn's shoulder like a creature coming home. The final ribbon of curse pulled tight around Adrian. Evelyn reached for him next, but Adrian shook his head, tears bright in eyes that had not known warmth for 7 years. "I was the first person who failed her," he said, his voice carrying through the entire court. Before the council erased her, before Silverpine abandoned her, before Cassandra turned my silence into a crown, I failed her. The confession struck harder than any command. The curse shuddered. Regret, once hidden, had become truth. Evelyn touched his hand. The black ice dissolved between their fingers. Adrian bowed his head, not to the ancient blood, not to the moonstone, not to the legend returning before his court. He bowed to the girl he had forgotten, and the entire kingdom watched the king remember. Morning did not arrive all at once. It entered Blackwood Crown slowly, first as a pale line beyond the eastern towers, then as a soft gold spilling over the snow-covered courtyard where hundreds of wolves remained bowed in absolute silence. Inside the throne hall, no one moved until the last trace of black ice vanished from Adrian Blackwood's hand. The air changed. For 7 years, the castle had carried the scent of cold stone, old fear, and a grief no one had been allowed to name. Now it smelled of thawing pine, candle smoke, and rain coming after a long winter. Evelyn stood beside the fractured moonstone with the royal wolf pressed gently against her side, his great head lowered beneath her hand. Her body felt hollow with exhaustion, but her heart was terribly awake. Every noble who had laughed at her now stared, as if the plain gray dress she wore had become more dangerous than any crown. Cassandra Vale stood near the council steps, her face stripped of its perfect calm. The moonstone light clung to her gloves, revealing dark runes stitched beneath the silk, proof of the curse she had hidden behind pretty words and courtly smiles. Marcus Hale took one look at Adrian. The king gave a single nod. No spectacle followed. No cruelty. No roaring command to satisfy the watching court. Cassandra and the council members who had helped erase the Harper line were escorted away under royal guard, their titles suspended, their records seized, their voices finally smaller than the truth they had tried to bury. That quiet consequence frightened the court more than rage would have. Rage ended quickly. Justice remained. Adrian turned back to Evelyn, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. The king who had once watched her humiliation from an obsidian throne now descended the steps without his crown. He carried it in both hands. When he reached her, he did not place it on her head. He did not claim her. He did not call her his Luna, as if a title could repair a childhood stolen, a name erased, or a promise broken in snow. Instead, Adrian lowered himself to one knee before her, the crown resting on the marble between them. Evelyn Harper, he said, his voice rough but steady. The Blackwood crown remembers you. The kingdom remembers your bloodline. I remember what I failed to protect. I cannot ask your forgiveness as a command, and I will not hide behind the curse to escape the man I became beneath it. I ask only for the chance to prove, day by day, that regret can become repair. The hall was silent enough for Evelyn to hear the royal wolf breathe. She looked at Adrian for a long moment, seeing the king, the boy from the photograph, and the man kneeling before the person he had once forgotten. The ache in her chest did not disappear. Forgiveness was not a door that opened because the world was watching, but neither was she the forgotten Omega waiting for someone to decide her worth. She placed one hand on the royal wolf's head, and with the other, she touched the old Harper mark glowing beneath her skin. Regret is not enough, she said softly. Remember me tomorrow. Remember every forgotten child in this kingdom. Remember when it cost you something. Adrian bowed his head. I will. Outside, the wolves rose only after Evelyn stepped forward. Not when the king moved. Not when the council guards passed. When she moved. The court saw it. The servants saw it. The nobles saw it and understood that power had not been taken by force that morning. It had been returned by truth. Evelyn walked to the open doors of Blackwood Crown, the royal wolf at her side, and Adrian a respectful step behind her.